Basically come from a place called Palakkad, right, which is in Kerala, and I was brought up in Hyderabad. My roots are from Palakkad, Kerala, and I was brought up in Hyderabad. I did my schooling and education, most of my education in Hyderabad. Then did a smaller stint in Bangalore. Okay, with an IT company. I think you might know a company called Business India. At that time there was a magazine. I used to work for Business India IT division, right? And then after that I moved to Australia, did my master's MS in IT in Australia, and after my MS in IT in Australia I went to Indonesia. I got an opportunity in Indonesia to work for a bank in Indonesia. So I did, while I was working in Indonesia, there was a lot of unrest in Indonesia because of some political issues. So at that time I started floating my resumes, expecting something to happen in US, right? Expecting to go to US, like a normal any Indian at that age, right? Trying to go to US, and so that was my total dream. So while I was floating my resumes on the net, one fine day I get a call from somebody in Japan saying that your skill set matches the exact requirement that we have, right? And are you interested in having some interviews and deciding whether you want to come to Japan? So I did not know much about Japan, other than the ones that we have learned in our 4th standard or 5th standard, that Japan is very technologically advanced, and Japan people are polite and all those things. Other than that, I did not know anything about Japan, right? Other than what we read in news. And during those days, I think Japan was not in Indian news. These days, I think every day you have Japan news in India. During those days, Japan was not in Indian news. So the awareness is not that high, right? So then I said, okay, why not? I take a chance. So then they did 4 rounds of interviews, and then they said, okay, come down to Japan, right? So then I reached Japan from Indonesia, right, to an IT company called Fusion Systems, and they were actually doing software for banks and financial institutions. Came down to Japan, and it was almost Christmas time, so a lot of my Indian colleagues in the company also were on vacation. So the first Indian I met was after 20 days, and at that time English also was not very much in Japan, right? At least now there's a lot of boards in English and everything, but at that time there was not much of it. That was a big challenge, like 20 days without talking to anybody. I mean, of course, there were a lot of foreigners and all this stuff, without understanding what a problem of an Indian is. Because I cannot go and ask a foreigner, where do I get spices or where do I get this? Because they don't know, right? So it took 20 days for me to get in touch with an Indian. That to one of my colleagues who came back from his vacation. That's when we started talking, right? So that's how I landed in Japan here. Before reaching here itself, as soon as I got the offer letter, right, I tried to seek help on the net. right? Because the company wouldn't provide me accommodation, and company wouldn't provide me the guidance, right? Of course, it helps me after I reach the office, but till I reach the office and the outside work, I have to do it on my own, right? That was the condition. And even from the airport to the house or airport to the office, company wouldn't give me any support. They of course give me guidance, like just typical Japanese companies. They give us instruction as to how to get out of the airport, how to get out of everything. All the documents were there, but the accommodation was on my own. So then I started searching on the net, tried to create friends in Japan, and then one of them helped me book a apartment here in Japan. My first apartment was in Nishimagome. Then I landed there, then stayed there for 3-4 months. Then slowly I realized what is possible in Japan, and then moved closer to the office, which was in Nakameguro. Nakameguro was the first place where I started working. Entrepreneurship I always wanted to do. I'm the first entrepreneur in my family. None of my ancestors were into business. So that was a big challenge for me, even to convince my parents back home to take this step. That was a big challenge, because my father was mostly none of my ancestors are in the business. My father, father's father, everybody, like nobody knew about the challenges in business. Yeah, if I had a business background, if my parents they could have guided me this one, but I'm here all alone, out of my parents' support area, and all alone in a country where like. And with a different language, right, with a different culture, right, so that is a bit of a challenge. The language was a big challenge for me, because I tried learning Japanese when I was in an IT company and when I was in the banks also. I tried learning Japanese, but mostly what I realized is that just learning Japanese by books is not possible, right? It has to be, you have to actually implement it. You have to actually start talking to people in Japanese. The one thing which I was doing is I was learning Japanese, but I had no place to use it, because I used to work in European banks, American banks, right, where nobody speaks Japanese, all English. Even Japanese speak English, right? So you don't have an opportunity to use what you have learned, right? So that was a bit of a challenge for me, and I did till 2005. My Japanese was almost at arigato gozaimasu and what do you call those basics. That was my Japanese level till 2005. Although I was learning with the books and everything, right? But after 2005, I have not touched a book, and I have improved my Japanese level quite high. The only change is 2005 I started my company, and I was forced to use it. For like suppliers and everybody, I was forced to use Japanese. That was when I realized just reading books or just writing exams will not help you, right? So unless you implement it, unless you use those languages, unless you use the language, it doesn't happen. Right from my college days, my old classmates would actually, if you meet them, they will tell you, during those days itself, I wanted to start up business, right? And during those days itself, my company name was formed. My company name, Raj Group, was formed in 12th class. A lot of things I have seen, right? That would probably be good for people who want to start up something. A lot of things I have seen in my life. I first think, I don't know how to do it, but at least I start thinking, right? I have no idea as to how I will do that. Like even in, when I went to Australia also, I wanted to go. I have convinced myself to go, but I don't know how to go. I wanted to do business. I had no idea what kind of business, because I was never inclined to cooking. right? I don't even make tea at home, right? Right? Of course, when nobody is there, I have to make tea, but I don't think I am a good cook. But it is more about knowing about the business rather than about making cooking, right? So since my wife cooks well, so I don't have to enter the kitchen, right? So in fact, at home, I don't even do any kind of work related to cooking or even day-to-day stuff, right? So a lot of my cousins actually are surprised. You don't cook, and I've never seen you make tea, and you went and started 4-5 restaurants. How could you do that? Right? So that was a surprising factor. Even now my cousins tease me. Even last week somebody calls me and tells me, I know you made biryani with sambar powder or something like that. So those kind of things actually, I was more into the business aspect of it rather than into this one. Of course, after I started the business, because the first business was started in 2005 while I was working in Credit Suisse, right? And then from that time till 2015, I was running my business parallel to a job. 2005, I was in Credit Suisse. I was working in Kamiacho, right? That is why you see the first branch in Kamiacho, because that was easy for me to handle, right? Because that was my first business. That was the first restaurant. I had no clue about how to run a restaurant business, right? Still, I had to venture into it because I had to do it at that time. If I don't do it at that time, then I will lose time, right? So I made sure that I get a place in a comfortable location, but that also is a big challenge to get a place in Japan, right? So luckily I got a place, comfortable location, which is 5-6 minutes walk from my office, right? So that helped me in monitoring the restaurant very well, because 11:30 in the morning, 11:30 for lunch, I am the first customer there, so that I can I can check the quality, or rectify things even before the customer comes, right? So that actually helped me in the logistics of managing and everything, right? So that was definitely a big help for me, because at that time, when you start up, there's a lot of cash crunch, right? And you can't employ as many people as you want, and then you can't employ managers, you can't employ people, so you have to be involved into it. And that was the time when I started entering into the kitchen. I don't enter my house kitchen, but I enter the kitchen of my restaurant, because just to ensure that kind of quality goes out of the kitchen. We do innovations also, and there are a lot of things which we actually brought to Japan. Like if you see vada sambar was served like once in a while in some restaurants, but not as a regular menu at that time, right? And we were the first to introduce vada sambar in a buffet format, right? Nobody else did vada sambar in buffet format. Nobody else did Kerala style appam, right? No, there are at least around 10-12 items in the menu which was introduced by us in Japan. Nobody has ever tried that out. Pani puris and buffet, nobody has tried that out. I always want to go out of the comfort zone, right? If you look at coming out of coming to Japan without knowing Japan, right? Or if you look at starting an Indian restaurant from an IT background, I think there are very few people at that time who have come from. Nowadays, a lot of IT people are starting Indian restaurants, but at that time, I don't remember of anybody starting IT person starting an Indian restaurant. To let you know the journey, like 2005, we started the first restaurant, and while I was working in IT, and 2015, I quit Citibank, right? That is when I quit my IT professional job, right? So within this 10 years, right, on a part-time scale, I was, by the time I reached Citibank, it was like we had 4 restaurants and 1 kindergarten school, along with my partner Mr. Pankaj and Jaydevi Goyal, right? So the restaurants I manage it on my own. I own the whole thing, but for kindergarten school I've got a partner. So we had this in the plate, and I had a full-time job, right? So at that time I said it's difficult for me to go beyond this without actually quitting my job, right? So then that's when I decided that okay, I will probably not continue my IT. Of course, at some point in time I would like to start up an IT company. That's the next stage. But at least from a full-time job point of view, I wanted to quit job. Right? We already had enough on my plate, right? So we had 4 restaurants and 1 kindergarten school by that time. So 2015 I quit, and then I started focusing on the other businesses. Beyond Nirvanam brand, the 4 restaurants that we have a small takeout joint called Buy Spice, and which is managed by, which is like a Coco Ichiban format, right? A Coco Ichiban format with Indian food, right? And that we would like to expand in the franchise model, just like Coco Ichiban. Let's see how it works. So that is one project that we have recently, and that is managed by a Japanese partner, Abe-san and Otsuka-san. And we have a foreign language school in Hyderabad, which is managed by a very good old friend of mine, old classmate of mine, Mr. Ajay Kumar. And it is day-to-day management is done by the previous CEO. We have taken over the school, so day-to-day management is done by the CEO, the previous CEO itself, Mr. Saichar. And we have a kindergarten school in near Shibakoen, near Tokitawa. It's a very prime location called Star Kids. It's managed by my partners, Mr. Pankaj Goyal and Mrs. Jaydevi Goyal. Now, foreign language school teaches French, Spanish, Japanese, and Chinese. So we teach all this one. But after we took over, we are now strengthening the Japanese part. We are strengthening it. So that because I'm here and I can support them, so we took over the Japanese part. The previous CEO, who was Mr. Saicharan, he continues to be on the board, right? And we all 3 manage the Indian school, the foreign language school. It's called Vivekananda Institute of Foreign Languages, and it was awarded the best foreign language institute in 2000. I think a few years back, it was awarded the best foreign language institute. I think 2013 it was awarded by Shashi Tharoor. A job placement that is started, but that is the idea of actually taking over the school. Basically, we have tied up with now NSDC. There are 2 skill councils, Electronic Skill Council and Retail Skill Council. We have done an MOU with them, right? So to take people from India, train them in our language school and bring them to Japan. And we have tied up with a company in Hiroshima and one company in Tokyo. So that is the company in Tokyo. We are tying it up now. Maybe in 2 weeks' time we will have an MOU there. So they have already committed 500 people to recruit 500 people from India, right? So that is the whole purpose of this Vivekananda Institute of Foreign Languages. So to facilitate this, taking people from India, training them in Japanese and bringing them to. I think it was the second time that we are meeting Mr. Modi, and last time it was in Kobe, when during the what do you call community meet, right? So it's a good opportunity to meet him, and it is definitely a energetic environment at that time. Whenever he is around, it's quite vibrant. Like, you don't have to speak to him, and you can actually feel the whole. You can feel the energy in him. So it's pretty encouraging, right? And I think I would like to also highlight that this time the Modi event was handled very meticulously by the Indian Embassy. right? And it is very difficult to handle such a huge event. And it was meticulous to the point as to where you will stand, right? Who will stand where, right? Which is very, very difficult, right? Very, very difficult. So I would like to congratulate the Indian Embassy for an excellent job there. So far in business, I've got 2 awards. Right, in 2016, I was awarded Future of India Entrepreneur Award by CNBC TV 18. Right, in 2016, it was an award for overseas Future of India Business Award. So that was one. And recently this year, I got an award for award called Gershom International Award. So Gershom International Award is basically they select the non-resident Keralites who have gone outside and achieved something, right? So this time the awards were given to around 10 countries, people from 10 countries. So there were a lot of around 40-50 people had come from overseas, and every year they conduct awards. So that award also was given for business excellence. Name of my company is called Raj Group. So I don't want to restrict it to either restaurant or I would like to, that's my wish list. I don't know how far we can go with that. That's my wish list, that I would like to enter into different areas, right? Right now we are into education. We are into food and hospitality, right? Food and hospitality. We are into education in the sense, education 2 ways. Like one is the kindergarten education, one is the foreign language school, one is manpower. We are already entered into manpower. So hopefully we will enter into other, and we have already entered into the tours and travels. So we have a company in India, and we have started their branch here, which we will manage it, right? It's called Parveen Japan. Parveen Japan is the tour company name. It was Nirvanam Tours, but now now the branding is different. So we make it Parveen Japan, and I have a partner with that called Nawaz Satak. He was a very old friend of mine who used to live in Japan, but now lives in India. So one fine day, got a call from him that, of course, Nirvanam Tours was on the way to to execute things on the tourism sector. So at that time he said, okay, why don't we do this? There's a big company in Japan, in India, who wants to enter this one. So I said, okay, why not rebrand Nirvanam Tours as Parveen Japan. So now we have already, we are now, hopefully by March or April, we will get the licensing and everything done. So hopefully by March and April we should be doing, we should be starting the tourism sector. I think the Indian community in Japan is a bit different from the other Indian communities outside India. Like I've been in Australia, I've been in Indonesia, I traveled to Singapore, Malaysia and all those places. So Indian community in Japan is, they're very closely knit, right? So in other countries, Indian communities are dispersed, not that connected, probably because of the scale, right? In US you can see there are 100 Indian communities there, there are 100, 200, but probably that is because of the scale and that's because of the distance. Here within Tokyo, the distance is not high, distance is not much, so that's why they're very closely knit. Of course, there are like Kerala community, there are Andhra community, there are Tamil Nadu community. Overall Indian community is closely knit compared to other countries, which I think is a good thing. I think the way we should move forward is the more coordination that we have, right? I feel guilty that I don't have much time to contribute to the organization, but I contribute in a different way. I like sponsoring Indian events, and whenever there's a Indian community request saying that, okay, can you make this for us? I don't look at that as a business opportunity. I look at that as a community service, right? So that's why for the community, if it is for the community, I give it as subsidized rate, right? So that way I contribute, because personally I don't have much time to contribute. So I thought this is one way of contributing it. So a lot of communities, like I'm very close to Andhra community, I'm very close to Kerala community, the Tamil community also, very close to them. So they come up and say that, okay, we want to put this kind of event or something. So then I sponsor stuff, right? So that's my way of giving it back. Although I'm guilty about not giving time, but I at least give it in this way. Yes, I am very much associated with Nihon Kairli. So we're very active there, active only on the day of the event. But background, I think they take care of it very well, so I don't need to put my hands there. See, I get a lot of requests for mentorship. So a lot of people come to me and they come and say that, okay, I want some help and all this stuff. I'm very open to that. Very open to that. See, I'm not a person like the old traditional business. No, I cannot tell you this kind of thing. So I'm not that kind of person. So because I believe the moment you share, I think you also learn a lot of things, right? When you start sharing, I've seen a lot of things, a lot of young entrepreneurs, right? They come and ask questions which I have not thought of. That's when I start thinking, like, why didn't I think of this, right? Right. So I enjoy that kind of conversation, right? So I definitely encourage a lot of entrepreneurs to come into the field, whichever field they're comfortable in, right? Or if they want to go out of their comfort zone also, right? I think entrepreneurship, they have to be prepared for a lot of things beyond the normal job, right? So that is one thing which they have to be prepared. And second thing which I've noticed, a lot of people, out of the 10 people who come for mentorship, right, I think only one person actually jumps into it. That rate, I think it should increase, right? 10 people come to me saying that, sir, I have got this kind of idea, what do you think of it, right? And how to go about it. I just explain to them and how to go about it. But they don't jump into it because of the risk, they're risk averse, right? So I think youngsters right now, they are much more willing to take risk compared to people in the past, right? So that is probably, I would say, if you want to do it, jump. You can learn swimming after jumping. Don't learn everything. You can't learn everything and then jump, right? You can't learn swimming on the floor, on the ground, and then jump into the water. You have to jump into the water, right? So that is very important for the youngsters. So I do encourage a lot of people, and sometimes I do mentorships also. But most of the times what happens is, out of 10, around 8 to 9 people, they come, have 2-3 meetings, they go, they take 1 or 2 steps, and then they're silent, right? So that actually is a bit of worry for me. But I think compared to the youngsters at 25, 30 now, they are a bit more risk-taking, they have a risk-taking, appetite. Back home, my father, my mother. My father is Dr. Anil Chandrasekharan, and my mother is Shobha Chandrasekharan. My brother is Gopal Raj. Okay, so my father and my parents are like not earlier. I have seen a lot of shift in their attitude towards business before I started and after I started. Right. So before I started, my father was like, "Are you sure you want to get into business?" kind of thing. Right, and after he has seen the success, he now asks me, when are you starting the next one? Right, right. That's a big change, right? My mother is a housewife, right? She gives me a lot of support in terms of she's because my father is more calculative, right? That's why is like typical example. When I was in 10th, and my father never used to allow me to ride bike. Right? Whenever my father is out, my mother slowly encourages me to do it. Right? Encourages me to do it. It's fine, kind of thing. So you see the risk pattern, right? Although my father is like strong in one sense, but she's strong in the other side. She's encouraging in the other side, right? He encourages in a different way, in a more calculated way, right? My mother is like, okay, jump, kind of thing. So this combination actually probably helped me in going out of my comfort zone, right? This combination was very important. Yes, yes. So it was more, that was very important, I think, right? Because if both of them are towards one side, then I would have probably not had this kind of attitude towards risk taking. Of course, I do both ways now, right? I also follow my dad in terms of calculating, and also jump wherever I have to jump. My father actually, he was into a private sector, but he has done his legal also now. He's a advocate now. He's also recently been conferred with a doctorate degree in consumer affairs, right? Of course, he has not pursued much of legal side. He was more into what you call marketing and everything. So, but from an academic side, he's a advocate, right? And we come from a middle class family. We are not from a rich family or something, but probably somewhere around the middle class family. So my brother also supports me in a lot of my businesses here, right? He is into advertising, right? So he gives me all the advertising inputs, and a lot of my profiles that you have seen was made by him. So he takes care of that part of it. Right? He does a lot of support, like whenever I need support, right? The person I can go to him and say, okay, get this done. So he gets a lot of things done. So he used to work for Mudra Communications and all the big advertising companies. Now he started his own advertising firm. His name is Gopal Raj. Okay, so he does a lot of my advertising and whatever is required. Yeah, my PR kind of thing, right? So that way. My family is very supportive. I'm very lucky to have my family very supportive. In Japan, my wife Divya and my kid Aryan. Okay, my kid is in grade 3, and he goes to K International School here in Japan. So my wife takes care of a lot of my business, back end of my business. So she's the backbone of the business. So, right. And of course she cooks well. That's why I don't need to enter the kitchen. So that also gives me a lot of support. Where, like, when we come and eat and say that no, this is not right. So whenever there's a new dish coming up, then I said, okay, decide. Kind of. Earlier I used to do it on my own, but now I outsource it to her. She takes care of the backbone. If you see the Facebook post, it is handled by her. All the social media is handled by her, right? She handles all the social media stuff. I think family support is very important, right? Because if you don't get enough support from your family, right? If you don't have peace of mind in the family, I think it's very difficult to run business. Of course, these are two different things, but two interconnected things. It's two different, but interconnected. If you have trouble there, you have trouble here. If you have trouble here, you have trouble there, right? Youngsters, I would suggest start before you marry. In the sense, you will not be able to give so much time to the family at the startup time, right? So start before you marry, and one more advantage is that if you start after marriage, right, the expectation of your partner, right, when you married is different than, right? Like somebody, suppose let us say he or she is marrying you, and then you start up business, and then you are going through a lot of bad time, right? Of course, in the start, everybody faces bad time, right? If someone is married, right, I would suggest that get them prepared that you will spend less time with them, right? So if he's a bachelor, then it's the best time to start. It's very important to convince them, right? Convince them and put the expectations right, because it's very difficult. You have to have the family support, right? So that, I think, you need to set it right before you jump into something. I would have wanted to start earlier, right? Because of course 2005 was my limit when I said I have to start. Had I been prepared with finances and everything, I would have probably started my job earlier. Because when I started my job, when I started the business, I was like, I put in all my savings and plus 9 million yen negative, in the sense borrowed money, right? So I'm a bit. One more thing which I was very hesitant to do is borrowing, which is very important for. I think in business it's very important to borrow, right? Yes, I was I've never been exposed to loans, right? I never take loan even from my father, right? So I was, even when I studied in my studied in Australia, I tried to do a lot of self-funding. I used to teach, right? I used to do part-time work. Yes, I used to do that, right? So that I don't put. Of course, there is a burden on my parents, but I try to reduce the burden. Reduce the burden. So loan was something like, okay, it was a fearful thing, but now the learning. If I had to change, I would have probably borrowed in 2000 and started. I didn't start till 2005 thinking that I have to borrow, right? So that, I think people need to, although calculated, people need to do that. Don't worry about the loan. Try to see how much, try to calculate how much you can get. So that I would like to suggest all the newcomers, like, okay, don't worry about the loan. Of course, not like you go rampant on that, practical, calculated, right? So I would think my attitude towards loan started changing somewhere around 2012, 13 kind of thing, right? 12, 13, after that kind of experience and everything, okay, I can repay that loan. After I get that confidence, right? Had I changed that attitude before, I would have probably been a bit more expanded. Our company would have much more, we could have expanded the company much more.